The sky was dark and broken. Smoke rose from the ground like silent screams. The village was no longer a home. It was a graveyard now. She sat alone beside a burnt wall, her eyes dry but her heart drowning in tears. Her name was Kalen, a woman of the Zari species. Tall, blue-skinned, and once full of life. But now she was a widow, a mother with no child, a survivor with no reason to live. Her husband died 3 weeks ago, crushed in a blast during a sudden attack. Her child was lost during the evacuation. Some said the child ran. Others said the fire took him. She didn't know. No one knew. And now no one cared. Kalen had not eaten in days. The food was gone. The water was poisoned. Even the wild roots were dry. Her body was weak. Her bones could be seen under her skin. She was waiting for the end. But the end did not come. Footsteps echoed in the silence. Sharp, steady. From the direction of the hill. She looked up slowly, eyes wide. A figure was walking down. A tall shape in metal armor. A human soldier. The enemy. She panicked. She tried to crawl away, but her limbs did not move. Her strength had left her long ago. The soldier stopped 5 feet away. His helmet hid his face, but she could feel his eyes watching her. His hands went to the gun on his side. Was this it? Was this her death? She closed her eyes, but the sound of a weapon never came. Instead, she heard a soft click, then something fall to the ground. She opened her eyes. The gun was on the ground. The human was kneeling now. Slowly, carefully, he took off his helmet. He was young, maybe 25. His face was tired, but his eyes were not cruel. He reached into his belt and pulled out a silver packet, a ration bar, marked with the red human army symbol. Without a word, he placed it on the ground and pushed it toward her. Kalen blinked. She didn't understand. Why would a human give her food? She looked at the packet, then at him. He gave a small nod, as if saying, "It's okay, take it." Her hands shook as she reached forward. The wrapper made a soft crinkle sound. She opened it slowly and took one bite. Tasted like dust and hope. Tears filled her eyes. The human stood up and looked around, checking for danger. Then he picked up his helmet and gun. As he turned to leave, she spoke, her voice dry like sand. "Why?" He stopped, then said only 2 words. "You're not enemy." Then he walked away, disappearing behind the burnt trees. Kalen held the food close. She had no answers, no understanding. Only one truth now lived in her heart. A human, her enemy, had given her his last meal. Why? Was it pity? Was it guilt? Or was it something else? She didn't know. But something inside her, something buried deep, began to move. Not fear, not hunger, hope. That night she didn't sleep. She watched the stars with tired eyes, waiting for the footsteps to return. The next morning came slowly, with pale light creeping through the smoke-filled sky. Kalen had not moved much. Her body was still weak, but her mind had changed. Something new lived inside her now. A question, a memory, a spark. She kept thinking about the human, the way he had knelt, the way he had placed the food gently on the ground, not like she was an enemy, but like she was someone worth saving. She waited all day, but he didn't return. Her thoughts whispered many things. Maybe he was punished. Maybe he was only passing by. Maybe he is dead now. She didn't want to care, but her heart did. 2 nights passed. No sound. No sign. Then, on the 3rd night, she heard it again. The same careful steps. Not loud, not fast, just cautious, like someone avoiding dry leaves. She didn't move, didn't speak. The soldier stepped out of the trees. Same armor. Same steady hands. But this time, he brought a small bottle of water too. He placed it near her and sat a few steps away. Still no words. She looked at the bottle. Clear water. Cold. From the mist. She drank half. Her throat hurt, but the pain felt good. Real. "Why do you keep coming?" she asked. He shrugged. "Because I can. Your people, they would not like this." He gave a small smile. "My people don't know." Pause followed. Heavy. tense. Two enemies, sitting with only silence between them. Then he spoke again. I saw your village before the war. She looked up, surprised. I was part of the recon team, before everything burned. You were standing near the well with a child. Her heart jumped. You remember my son? He nodded slowly. He laughed at our drone. Threw a rock at it. She smiled for the first time in weeks. It was small, broken, but it was a smile. He hated machines, she said. He thought they had no soul. I think he was right, the soldier replied. She studied him for a long moment. His uniform was dusty, scratched. His boots were tearing at the edges. His face had new cuts, fresh dirt. You don't look like a winning soldier. I'm not, he said. I'm just trying to survive. She nodded. So am I. That night they didn't speak much. But the silence between them felt less empty. Over the next few days he returned again and again. Always quiet, always careful. Sometimes he brought dried fruit, sometimes just sat and shared a few minutes of peace. Colleen started walking again. Her steps were slow, but each day she got stronger. She learned his name was Mason. He never asked hers. Maybe he thought it was easier that way. One day, while sitting on the broken wall, Mason said, Do you know what they call this place now? She shook her head. They call it Zone 9. Forbidden area. High radiation. Enemy land. She laughed dryly. It was once a school. My child learned numbers here. Mason didn't laugh. They told us it was empty, he said. That no one was left. They told us humans would burn everything. Both of them sat in that truth for a while. Later that evening, Mason looked troubled. His eyes scanned the horizon too often. What's wrong? Colin asked. I think someone saw me coming here. She tensed. They'll punish you? He nodded. Could be court-martial. Or worse. Then stop coming. He shook his head. I can't. Why? He looked at her directly, for the first time in days. His voice was low. Because you're the only one who still looks at me like I'm human. She didn't know what to say. That night, he stayed longer than usual. He gave her the rest of his food, a small piece of dried meat and a protein bar. This is all you have, she said. I'll find more, he replied. But if not, then I'll be hungry. She stared at the food, then at him. Why are you doing this, Mason? He paused. My sister died last year, starved. On a planet far from here. We got her message too late. If someone had just helped her, maybe she would still be alive. Colleen felt her heart ache. She understood now. This wasn't just kindness. It was guilt. It was grief. It was something deeper. Mason stood up. I won't come tomorrow. Patrol's too close. But I'll try the day after. She watched him go, his shadow long and lonely. As he disappeared into the trees, she whispered something into the wind. You gave me life when no one else would. I will not forget. And for the first time in a long time, she meant it. The rain came quietly during the night, washing the ash from broken walls and silent streets. Drops landed on Colin's skin, cold and real. She stood beneath the burnt roof, watching the gray clouds weep over a dead world. Mason hadn't come. She had waited, not moving for hours. Each sound in the trees made her heart rise and fall again. But it was not just fear or loneliness that troubled her now. It was something she had not felt in a long time. Restlessness. A question kept turning in her mind. Why him? Why here? Why now? He had risked his life for her, not once, but many times. She could not stop thinking about the way he looked at her. Not like a monster, not like a stranger, but like someone who mattered. She needed to know why. And so, when the sky turned to smoke again, and the trees stood still, she made a choice. She would find him. She wrapped the old cloth around her shoulders, took a deep breath, and began to walk, slowly, carefully, toward the human camp she had once feared. The path was not far, but every step was danger. She moved through ruins, ducked under broken beams, and hid when she heard drones above. Her body was still weak, but her purpose was strong. As she neared the edge of the forest, she saw movement, human soldiers walking in pairs, scanning with red lights. She waited behind a fallen tree until they passed. Then she saw him, Mason. He was sitting on a crate, head down, hands covered in dried mud. His face looked tired, like he hadn't slept. There was a bruise on his cheek, and a small cut above his brow. She felt something tighten inside her. Before she could move, a voice behind her said, "You shouldn't be here." She turned quickly. Another human stood there, older, holding a rifle but not pointing it. He had seen her. "I don't want trouble," she said, her voice steady. "You already brought it," he replied. Before she could explain, Mason looked up and saw her. His eyes widened. "Colin." She stepped out from the shadow, and for a second, everything stopped. The older soldier looked at Mason. "You know her?" Mason stood slowly. "She's not a threat. She's the enemy." "No," Mason said firmly. "She's the reason I still remember who I am." The silence was deep. Then the older soldier sighed and lowered his weapon. "You've got 5 minutes. Then she's gone." Mason walked toward her, his face a storm of worry and relief. "What are you doing here? It's not safe." "I needed to see you," she said. "I needed to ask. Why do you really keep coming back?" He looked away. "I told you. My sister." "No, that's part of it. But not all." He was quiet. Then he said something that shook her. "Because you're not what I was told you'd be." She blinked. "They told us aliens were cold, dangerous, no family, no heart. But then I saw you crying beside a child's toy, holding ashes like they were still warm. You broke that lie." She looked down, unsure of what to say. He continued, "And I lied too. I didn't just give you my last meal because I remembered my sister. I gave it because you reminded me what mercy looks like. And I needed that more than food." They stood in silence, surrounded by walls of war, holding something gentle between them. Then Colin did something she never thought she'd do again. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small metal disc, black and cracked. She held it out. "What is it?" Mason asked. "My husband was not just a villager. He was a scientist. And this was his last message. He said it holds a map to something buried deep under the village. Something powerful." Mason took it slowly. "Powerful how?" "He called it a safeguard, a last weapon. Said it could change the war or end it completely." Mason looked at her, eyes full of shock. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because I trust you. And because if what he said is true, we may not have much time." Far behind them, alarms suddenly began to ring. Red lights flashed across the human camp. "They've tracked something," Mason said. "Maybe the disc," Cullen whispered. "Or me." He looked at her and nodded. "Then we run. Together." And without another word, they disappeared into the forest, carrying a secret that could destroy both their worlds or save them. The forest was darker now, not because of night but because the sky had changed. Black clouds had started to gather above the trees, but they were not clouds from nature. They moved like machines, silent, watching. Colin and Mason ran beneath them, holding their breath between footsteps. They didn't speak. Words would only slow them down. Every branch they pushed aside felt like a warning. Every shadow looked like a threat. In Mason's pocket, the metal disc clicked softly with each step, as if it were alive and counting down. They stopped only when they reached the edge of the broken village again, the place where it all began. Colin bent down, out of breath. Her legs were shaking. "This is where the map points," she said, pressing her palm on a cracked stone near the old school. "There's something beneath this ground. Something hidden." Mason looked around. "This place is crawling with radiation." "Are you sure?" She nodded. "My husband was not afraid to die, but he was afraid of this falling into the wrong hands." Together, they began clearing away the stones, one by one. It was slow work. Their fingers bled. Dust burned their eyes. But finally, they saw it. A circular hatch, metal and glowing faintly with blue symbols. "This wasn't made by your people," Mason said. "No," Colin replied. "It's older than my kind. Ancient tech. My husband studied it for years, and said we might need it if the war became something worse. Mason touched the edge of the hatch. It was cold, and yet it hummed, like it knew someone was there. Colin held out her hand, trembling. It needs his blood, or what's left of it. From her satchel, she pulled out a cloth. Inside it was a small glass shard from his armor, still stained with dried violet blood. She touched it to the center of the hatch. The ground rumbled. Then, with a soft hiss, the hatch opened. Stairs led down into darkness. The air that rose from below smelled like old metal and something else. Something not from this world. They exchanged one look and began to descend. The stairs seemed endless, carved in a strange pattern, lit only by dim blue lights along the walls. No dust, no cobwebs. It was as if this place had been waiting. At the bottom, they entered a large round chamber. The walls were lined with mirrors, but none showed their reflection. In the center floated a cube, silver, silent, spinning slowly. "What is that?" Mason whispered. Colin stared at it. "I think it's alive." As they stepped closer, the cube stopped spinning. A soft voice filled the air, not from speakers, but from everywhere. Two souls, opposite, but linked. "Why have you come?" Mason looked around. "Who's speaking?" Colin answered carefully. "We seek the weapon." "You seek power," the voice replied. "But power breaks what it cannot control." "We want peace," Colin said. "Not control." "Then you are rare." The cube began to shift. It broke apart into thousands of tiny shapes, then reformed into a glowing orb. Inside it, a small black sphere floated, pulsing slowly. "This is the core. Can disable every weapon on this planet. All machines, all drones, all ships." Mason stepped forward. "Wait, that means—" "Yes, no one can fight if there is nothing left to fight with." Colin's eyes widened. "That would end the war. Or bring chaos," the voice said. "Whoever holds the core becomes a target." Mason looked at Colin. "If we take this, we become hunted by both sides." She nodded. "But if we don't, the war will never stop." Suddenly, alarms rang from above. Mason's comm device beeped. A voice crackled through. "Unit 17, we found your signal. Return now. Enemy presence detected. Orders. Shoot on sight." Colin's eyes went cold. "They've followed us." Mason looked at the core. "We don't have time." He reached out, but the core didn't move. It floated still. "One of you must stay," the voice said. "What?" Colin gasped. "The core must be guarded. If both of you leave, it will vanish." Mason froze. "It's a trap." Colin shook her head. "No, it's a test." They looked at each other, and for the first time, both knew exactly what the other was thinking. One of them had to choose. Above them, footsteps pounded the ground. Shadows moved near the hatch. The silence below felt louder than the war outside. The sound of boots above grew louder. Dust drifted from the ceiling with each step, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Colin stood still, eyes locked on the glowing core. Mason didn't move either. The voice still echoed in the walls, calm but final. "One of you must stay. One must protect the core. If neither chooses, it will be lost forever." The core was floating inches above the floor, humming softly, its light pulsing like a slow heartbeat. It wasn't a weapon in the shape of a gun. It wasn't a machine of war. It was something older, smarter, designed to end fighting, not win it. But now it demanded a sacrifice. "I'll stay," Mason said suddenly, voice quiet but clear. Colin turned sharply. "No, you're not strong enough to outrun them. I can hold them off. Buy you time." "This isn't about running," she interrupted. "You don't understand." Mason frowned. "Then explain." She took a step closer to the core. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. "My husband didn't just find this place. He was born from it." Mason's face tightened. "What do you mean?" Colin placed her hand over the soft blue light near the wall. The surface shifted, becoming clear. Mason watched in silence as a glowing image appeared, a memory stored in light. It showed her husband, standing where they now stood, younger, wearing a white coat. Beside him were other Zari and humans. I thought this place was ancient, Mason said. It is, she replied. But there was a time long ago when humans and Zari worked together. My husband found records. We were allies once. We built things like this to protect peace, not destroy it. The image changed. It now showed her husband speaking into a recorder, his voice sad. If war returns, this core must not be used as a weapon. Only one who has lost everything and asks for nothing can be its guardian. Kalen turned to Mason. I came here for answers, but I think I was meant to return. Mason stared at her, his chest rising and falling with emotion. Don't do this. I have to, she said. This is my home. My people started the fire. Let me be the one who puts it out. Suddenly, the hatch above began to unlock. The soft click-clack of military rifles echoed down the stairwell. They're coming, Mason said. Colin smiled, soft and strange. Then you must go. Mason shook his head. I can't just leave you here. You must, she said, placing something in his hand. It was a piece of her husband's broken wristband, embedded inside a blinking chip. This is the data, she whispered. Proof of everything. The core, the message, the truth. Mason closed his fingers around it. Tell them, she said. Tell your people. We weren't always enemies. A single tear slid down her cheek, but her voice remained strong. Tell them, I forgave them. Footsteps neared. Voices shouted from above. Mason stepped back. I'll come back for you. You won't need to, she whispered. Just live the way he wanted us to. The core glowed brighter. Mason took one last look at her, the alien who had once been left to die, and now stood as the last guardian of peace. Then he ran, up the stairs, past the flickering lights, past the men with rifles who shouted his name but were too late to stop him. Colin stood alone now. The chamber was silent once again. The walls pulsed softly, the mirrors lit up, and for the first time, she saw herself reflected in everyone. Not starving, not broken, not forgotten, but standing tall. The guardian. The core floated closer to her, warm and still. It spoke again, but only in her mind. You have lost. You have given. You may now protect. She sat beside it, her hand resting near its light. Far above, the war still burned. But deep below, something had changed. The wind above ground had changed. It wasn't just cold, it carried something sharp now. Paranoia. Mason moved through the shadows like a hunted ghost. The piece of metal Colin had given him pulsed in his palm, faint and steady. A quiet heartbeat of something bigger than war. He had escaped the chamber. Barely. The other soldiers had fired warning shots. But he didn't stop. He didn't explain. What could he say? That an alien woman had chosen to stay behind to protect a power that could silence every weapon. That the enemy he was told to kill had saved his soul? No one would believe him. Not yet. He reached the edges of Camp Redstone just before sunrise. The sky was pink with smoke. Machines walked between tents like giant beetles. Men in armor stood with cold eyes and warm guns. Mason didn't go through the front gate. He knew better. He slipped through the side, found the back of the medical tent, and crawled under the canvas like a rat escaping fire. Inside, he found an old friend, Dr. Lin. She gasped when she saw him. You're supposed to be gone, dead or arrested. Mason handed her the metal chip. I need you to read this. Now. She looked at it, confused. What is it? Truth. She stared at him for a long second, then led him to her terminal. The screen blinked on. Files opened. Images. Maps. Logs. A voice recording began to play, Colin's husband, speaking about a peace weapon, a core, a united history. Dr. Lin leaned forward. This can't be real. It is, Mason said. And it's still alive. Guarded. By who? He looked down. By someone better than us. The tent flap burst open. 2 soldiers stormed in. Corporal Mason, you're under arrest. You've crossed into enemy zone and violated Command Order 22. He didn't fight. But he didn't stay silent either. If you arrest me, you bury a chance to end the war. One of the soldiers sneered. You think we care what some alien told you? Dr. Lin stepped between them. He's not lying. I saw the data. The other soldier paused. We'll see what command says. They dragged Mason away, hands tied, the chip taken. But before they left, Lin met his eyes and gave him the smallest nod. Hope. Mason sat in a metal room for 3 hours. No window. One camera. No voice. Then the door opened. A man in black uniform walked in. Clean. Calm. Dead eyes. I'm Colonel Strath. I've read your little story. Mason said nothing. You claim a weapon exists that could end all fighting. You claim it's in enemy hands. You claim you were helping her, the alien. She has a name. Strath smiled faintly. They always do. He circled Mason like a lion around a tired deer. You want peace. I understand. But peace is expensive. It needs control. Order. Mason's jaw tightened. Or maybe it just needs someone brave enough to stop killing. The colonel leaned close. That's not bravery. That's betrayal. He left the room without another word. But as the door shut, Mason knew what it meant. They were going to take the core. Not to destroy it, but to own it. Back underground, Colin sat in silence. The core floated beside her, quiet as ever. But it began to glow. She opened her eyes. What is it? She whispered. They are coming. She stood slowly. They have found the signal. They bring weapons. Her voice stayed calm. They cannot activate you, can they? Only the Guardian may use the core, but others may still try. Colin looked up, eyes sharper than ever. Then they'll fail. Not before they destroy much. She nodded. Her hands clenched into fists. Above her, war drums began to beat again. Not with sound, but with movement. Soldiers. Drones. Missiles in the sky. And on both sides, whispers began to rise. Something powerful has been found. Something that could end everything. But only Colin knew the truth. Power doesn't end wars. People do. And someone would have to make the next choice. It began without warning. A sharp sound in the distance, like the sky had cracked. Then another. Then silence. And then, everything moved at once. Colin stood deep underground, eyes closed, hand resting near the core. She felt the tremor before she heard it. Machines rolling across broken earth, human boots marching through ash, alien aircraft swarming the skies above. They were coming for her, but not just for her. For it, the core. Not to protect it, to take it, to control it. The lights in the chamber flickered as the ground shook again. She looked up. I waited, she whispered. I hoped they would listen, but they're still choosing power. The core pulsed slowly in answer. You have not failed. You have only reached the final question. She swallowed hard. What question? When peace is possible, but pain is certain, will you still choose it? She didn't answer. Not yet. Far above, Mason sat in a prison transport, hands bound, eyes burning with helpless anger. Through the cracks in the wall, he saw the tanks roll by. He saw the carrier ships lift. He heard the voices of men preparing for glory, not peace. They're going to dig it up, he muttered. They're going to break everything. Beside him, a young guard shifted uncomfortably. What was she like? The guard asked. Mason looked at him. She was starving when I found her. Weak, alone. But she still said thank you. The guard looked away, ashamed. At the edge of the dead village, the human army arrived. They moved fast, efficient, weapons pointed, scanners hot. Colonel Strath stood at the front. He gave the order. Open the ground. Metal arms tore through rubble, pulling away stones and dust. Soldiers surrounded the hatch Colin had once opened with memory and grief. Now it was being forced. They dropped explosives onto the seal. Colin felt the explosion before it reached her. Dust rained down. The core glowed bright, not in fear, but in response. The chamber will fall. I know. They will not stop. I know. Then ask the final question. Colin stepped forward. and asked it out loud. Can you erase it all? The core pulsed once. Yes, but only if you give everything. Colin looked around the chamber one last time. The walls that held her past. Her husband's last gift. The place where she was supposed to die. She smiled softly. Then take everything. The core rose higher, and the light became blinding. At the surface, the soldiers reached the chamber. They looked down and saw her, standing tall, blue skin glowing. One last breath. One last word. Enough. And then light exploded. But it was not heat, not fire. It was a wave, a pulse. It swept across the village, through the hills, over the forests. And with it, all machines stopped. Tanks froze. Guns failed. Ships fell from the sky, not crashing, but landing softly, like they forgot how to fly. Drones dropped like dead birds. The war paused. The war forgot itself. Hours later, the silence was complete. Mason stood at the edge of the ruined site, now free. He looked at the crater where the chamber used to be. She was gone. No trace. No body. No core. Just silence. And a broken scarf caught on a burned branch. He picked it up. It was hers. He held it to his chest and cried. Not for her death, but for her choice. She had given up everything, not to win, but to give others a chance to stop fighting. Weeks passed. The war didn't restart. Not right away. With no weapons, no drones, and no power, people had to speak. Talk. Trade. Mason took the chip Colin had given him and gave it to the world. It showed everything. The core. Her husband's message. The truth of who started what, and why none of it mattered anymore. And for once, the world listened. Years later, when peace began to look like something real, they built a statue at the center of the old battlefield. Not of a soldier, not of a general, but of her. Not holding a weapon, but offering a meal. And at the bottom, carved in stone, were the last words Mason remembered her saying. You gave me your last meal. Today, I give you a future.